All right, hello, and welcome back to Stuff I Googled This Week, the show by the ignorant, for the ignorant, in a desperate attempt to make us all a bit less ignorant. This is week 2. Hopefully you learned some fun things last week. This week will be fun as well. I sure think I'm going to enjoy it. I enjoyed doing the research, and now I'm going to share it with you. The game this week is going to be The Binding of Isaac. Pretty fun game. Hope you enjoy. This week is going to be a bit heavy, so I'm going to start it off with a wee joke. What's green and has wheels? Grass. I lied about the wheels. It's so stupid, but I love it. Okay, with that bit of hilarity out of the way, just waiting for the noisiest airplane in the world to go past. All right, let's start with a topic that's very near to my heart, rejection-sensitive dysphoria. Just a bit of context, I recently started looking into ADHD because I came across a video that led me down this path of research that made me think that I might have it. Was never diagnosed or anything, but I was a really smart kid, and apparently smart kids tend not to get diagnosed quite so often. So I've just kind of been looking into it, and one of the big symptoms that really makes me suspect that I have it is this rejection-sensitive dysphoria. So it's a common symptom of ADHD. It's basically an extreme sensitivity to what others think or say about the person. Dysphoria comes from the Greek word meaning hard to bear, so it's hard to bear rejection. So if someone thinks they're being shunned or criticized by another person, even if they aren't actually being criticized by them, it feels very bad. 99% of people with ADHD are more sensitive to rejection. Sometimes it's imagined, but ADHD people are actually statistically criticized more often, generally because of, the flaws that come about in them because of the ADHD. 1 in 3 say that it's the hardest part of living with ADHD, which kind of makes sense because it causes you to live your life in constant fear of disappointing someone or upsetting someone or anything, so it's sometimes hard to tell what's me and what's, the personality I'm putting forth for this given situation. It's not fun. So what are some effects on life from rejection-sensitive dysphoria? Well, people with RSD tend to work hard to make everyone like or admire them. They stay out of situations where they might get hurt, which can lead to a social phobia or be confused with a social phobia. And it often becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. This is something I have experienced so much. For me personally, I tend to latch on to any sort of piece of evidence that might indicate that the person doesn't like me or is angry with me or whatever. And then I go, why don't they like me? I'm always nice to them. Screw them. And then I start acting more coldly to them. And then they go, why is this guy acting like a dick to me? Screw him. And then the cycle continues because now we just don't like each other because we think the other person doesn't like us, which is a great way to live life. Now here's some signs for RSD. Obviously the definition I've given is more of a general feeling of it, but these are some more specific signs that you might have it. So easily embarrassed. You're very angry or emotional when you feel like someone has hurt or rejected you. High standards for yourself that you often don't meet. Low self-esteem. Oh God, yeah. Anxious, especially in social settings. Yep. Problems with relationships. You tend to stay away from social situations and withdraw from others. You feel like a failure because you haven't lived up to others' expectations. That's a big one for me. Sometimes you think about hurting yourself. Thankfully, not so much with me, but apparently that's fairly common as well. And it's often confused with other disorders, like bipolar, OCD, depression, social phobia, but RSD episodes are intense and they don't last as long as with the other disorders. The page I was looking at also went into medications, but I'm not a doctor and I don't want to give any sort of information on that. So if you think you might have it, seek someone, qualified. Not me. Well, that was RSD. If you found anything in that kind of speaking to you, I would suggest looking into it yourself. Rick Green, who's part of the Red Green Show, if you're Canadian, I know that, he has a lot of nice videos on it, and there are a bunch of other YouTubers about ADHD. It's getting a lot more well-known, and certain symptoms that weren't necessarily commonly known 20 years ago are now seeing more prominence, so it's pretty useful. Next, let's talk about a hernia. I was just talking to my fiance, Taylor, the other day, and the topic of hernia came up, and I had a basic understanding of what it was, based largely on the Friends episode when Joey gets a hernia, but I wasn't really sure what exactly it entailed, so I looked it up. So a hernia is when an internal organ or other body part sticks out through the wall of muscle or tissue that normally contains it. This is usually in the abdominal cavity between the chest and the hips. Symptoms: a lump or bulge that can be pushed back in or can disappear when lying down. Yeah, remember that from Joey. And the lump comes back out when you push, so you're laughing, you're crying, you're coughing, or you're pooping. There are 4 forms that are the most common. Inguinal hernia, or inguinal hernia, I don't know how to pronounce it. Yeah, something like that. This is the most common of the 4. It affects men more than women. I'm also pretty sure this is what Joey had in Friends. With the inguinal hernia, that's how I'll pronounce it this time, fatty tissues or part of the intestine pokes into the groin at the top of the inner thigh. Alright, screw it, I looked it up and it's inguinal, apparently according to the dictionary website. Inguinal hernia. In men, the inguinal canal is a passageway for the spermatic cord and blood vessels leading to the testes, or nuts, as the scientists call them. In women, the inguinal canal contains a round ligament that supports the womb. Now, this kind of hernia is caused by weakened muscles, sometimes since birth, sometimes due to aging or straining of the abs or groin. Frequent coughing, obesity, and straining on the toilet can cause it. Or, as Joey learned, exercising with 15s. Damn you 15s. Next, we have the femoral hernia. With this one, fatty tissue or part of the intestine sticks into the groin at the top of the inner thigh, same as the last one. These are much less common, and they affect mainly older women. Next, we have the umbilical hernia. I think we all know where this is going. So here, fatty tissue or part of the intestine pushes through the abdomen near the belly button. Hence, umbilical. This is most common in newborns. Most close by themselves by 5. In adults, this is caused by being overweight, a long-lasting cough, or giving birth. Finally, we have hiatal hernia. This is where part of the stomach pushes into the chest cavity through an opening in the diaphragm. And the hiatal hernia is a bit different because it's mostly internal, so the symptoms, rather than the pain and the pushing out, it's more internal, like heartburn, indigestion, difficulty swallowing, frequent regurgitation, and chest pain. All right, that was hernias. So now maybe you know a bit more about hernias. Next, I've spoken about my issues with my voice over the years. You may hear it tiring already, who knows? I already did a chapter today, so it's a little tired today, but I've been treating it well. But part of it is honey. You hear a lot about honey being very useful for calming down the throat, and singers say honey and lemon in tea is great. I've found it's pretty good. I haven't noticed a huge difference, but I figure every little bit helps. However, I got this 3-pack of honey from the Costco, and by the time the container gets to like halfway full, it starts crystallizing. I know crystallized honey is still good to use, but it's kind of inconvenient because it doesn't come out of the stupid squeeze bottle, right? And then I have to try to force it out other ways. So I looked up how to prevent honey crystallization and what to do if it does crystallize. I was aware already that you need to just heat it up and then it'll, go back into its liquid form, but I wanted more information. So, why does it happen? It's a natural process. Honey is a supersaturated sugar-water solution. There's too much sugar for the amount of water it contains. So that means that over time, the sugar breaks out of the water, forms crystals with other solid things and sugars. This happens faster with raw honey. The processing that occurs with processed honey removes bee glue, pollen, and beeswax, which speed up the crystallization. Now, how do you fix it? Well, if you have a glass container, you put that in water on the stove and stir it, not the microwave. The microwave heats it unevenly, leading to speedy recrystallization, like it'll start recrystallizing pretty much right away. Also, it boils it so it changes the taste and texture of the honey, and it destroys some enzymes and vitamins, which are important. So if it's a glass container, put it on the stove in a pot, heat that up. If it's a plastic bottle, you don't want to put it on the stove because the plastic will melt. So you just want to use hot water from the tap. So that water is generally at a temperature that's not too hot and it won't melt the plastic. You don't want to go over about 140 degrees or so. And then once the water cools down, you just dump it out, add more hot water from the tap until it becomes liquid again. As an alternative, you can actually use the slow cooker. If you just stick it in on the lowest setting and stick it in for 6 or 8 hours, it should be good, according to the website. I'm actually going to try that sometime. Just make sure it doesn't go past that 140 degrees mark, so maybe check with a thermometer or something. Now, is there a way to prevent crystallization? Not hugely. You can look for honey that's higher in fructose or lower in sucrose. The less sucrose there is, the longer it takes for the sucrose to separate and then crystallize. For example, Tupelo and Acacia honey crystallize very slowly due to their low glucose content, so I guess that follows the same rules as sucrose. Also, keep it out of the fridge. That kind of goes without saying. Temperatures below 50 degrees makes it happen faster. Also, fun fact, you can whip crystallized honey together with liquid honey to create creamed honey, which is apparently great for spreading. That sounds pretty good, except that I don't love the taste of honey. Bummer. If you do, try that. All right, next we have the religious portion. This is not going to be a weekly thing, but I just figured last week I did 10 Commandments, and it was kind of interesting, but I already knew a lot about it. But I know a whole lot less about Islam. And, I figured I'd just focus on that for this week, since I did Christianity last week. And I suppose Judaism, since they also, right, follow the 10 Commandments? Yeah, that's Old Testament stuff. Now, most of my knowledge of Islam is pertaining to the bad parts, because, those tend to be the most relevant parts to non-Muslims, because they're the parts that can hurt me. Similar to how the things I know about Christianity are the negative things. However, being from the West, having grown up in Canada, Christianity is much more in the zeitgeist. So there are a lot of things that I know about Christianity that I don't necessarily know about Islam. Let's change that a bit, shall we? As I said last week, I'm not a big fan of religion in general. Does some good, but does some bad, and I think the good can generally be found in secular places. But, as long as you don't harm anybody else, you're good on my books. So since I know quite a bit less about Islam than Christianity, I'll probably be commenting on it a little less. But I'm just curious how Islam would compare to Christianity in this respect. Now, going into this, I wasn't even sure if there was an equivalent of the 10 Commandments in Islam, so I looked into it. I know they refer to teachings from biblical books and whatnot, but I don't know if the Quran included the commandments themselves or if they had their own version or what. So it seems that the closest analog to the 10 Commandments are the 5 pillars of Islam. It's not really the same thing since the pillars are much more all-encompassing, but it's a nifty thing to learn. Okay, I can't tell if that's a plane or some schmuck is mowing their lawn. Oh, well, hopefully you can't hear it. It's just this. It's not even work. You can deal. If you hear a buzz in the background, you can, report me. So, the 5 pillars of Islam. This is from metmuseum.org. 1. Profession of faith, or Shahada. This is the belief that there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is the messenger of God. As you may have noticed, this is very similar to the first commandment. And that's probably no coincidence. I feel like if you really want people to get into your religion, then you got to make rule number 1, this is the one, this is the way. Anyway, one becomes a Muslim by reciting this phrase with conviction. There is no God but God, and Muhammad is the messenger of God. Or I've also heard it, and Muhammad is his prophet. Number 2, the second pillar of Islam is prayer, or salat. Muslims pray facing Mecca 5 times a day: dawn, noon, mid-afternoon, sunset, and after dark. It includes a recitation of the opening chapter of the Quran, the Surah. You can pray at any location or together in a mosque where an imam guides the congregation. Men gather in the mosque for noonday prayer on Friday. Women may participate, but they aren't obliged. And this is followed by a sermon and other prayers. The third pillar is alms, or zakat. Yeah, none of these, don't take my word on any of these pronunciations, I'm just pulling them from my butt. So for alms, Muslims donate a fixed portion of their income to community members in need. I think Christianity does the same thing. That's basically what tithing is, right? A lot of common ground here, guys. Number 4, fasting. This one I find really interesting. Not seen a whole lot in Christianity, but I think it really is an interesting and powerful thing, in my secular way. So during the daylight hours of Ramadan, the 9th month of the Islamic calendar, all healthy adult Muslims must abstain from food and drink. This is to celebrate when the Quran was first revealed. The point of this is to share the hunger and thirst of the needy as a reminder of one's duty to help the less fortunate, which is really cool. That's the kind of religion I like. Also, as a fun fact, and this is something I didn't realize I wanted to look up, but I ended up learning, I remember when I was a kid, I remember Ramadan happening around Christmas. But then, more recently, it's been kind of a spring thing. And so, I was kind of confused, because I thought either my memory was off or something was amiss. Turns out, the Islamic calendar is based on the lunar cycle, and it rotates by about 10 days each year. So, when I was a kid in the early 2000s, it was happening in the winter, but then it shifts 10 days roughly every year, so it changes when in the year it occurs. So while nowadays it's the spring, it's like late April to May this year, I believe. Back in the early 2000s, it was in the winter. So, boom, nifty. And the 5th pillar is pilgrimage, or Hajj. Or maybe Hajj. Probably Hajj. This means that every Muslim whose health and finances permit it must make at least one visit to the holy city of Mecca in Saudi Arabia. They visit the Kaaba, it's believed to be the house Abraham built for God. Believers gather around Kaaba on the 8th and 12th days of the final month of the Islamic calendar, which, as previously mentioned, changes in terms of our modern Gregorian calendar. Well, that's just nifty. I hope you learned a thing or two about Islam. I sure did. I have one more joke before I get into my philosophy of the week, which I think will actually become a weekly thing. But first, this stupid joke that I saw, and slightly modified, but I find it so funny. Let me just say, it's stupid, okay? If you want to comment, this joke is so stupid, I get it, but I find it really funny too. Okay. So a bus of people were on their way to a baldness seminar when they crashed. And they died. So they go up to heaven and God says, "Hello, welcome to heaven." That's definitely how he sounds. "Hello, ho ho ho, I'm God. Welcome to heaven. You may have one wish." So the first guy goes up and, he's been bald all his life. And you know what? He wants some hair. So he says, "Hey God, I wish that I had hair like Fabio." And God snapped his fingers, and it happened. He had luscious locks that flowed down to his shoulders. He was never so happy. He ran past the pearly gates, and he was happy. The next guy in line sees how happy he is, and he goes, "That looks great." So he says, "Hey, God, I wish that I had hair like Keanu Reeves." Boom. Luscious locks as well. He goes in through the pearly gates. They start partying and shaking their heads around and enjoying all their hair. Well, the rest of the line sees this, and they all know what their wishes are, so as the line goes through, each one is wishing for the hair of their favorite celebrity. But God notices something. He sees the guy right in the back. He's just laughing uproariously, and the further up in line he gets, the harder he laughs. God didn't know what was going on, but eventually he made it to the front of the line, and he's laughing harder than he's ever laughed in his entire life. And God says, okay, I don't know what's so funny, but hey, what's your wish? And the guy, through fits of laughter, says, I wish they were all bald again. Okay. All right. So, that's so stupid. But it's so funny. It's so funny. And I'm balding, so I can say it. It's okay. Bald jokes are all I got. Anyway, it's now time for the final segment of this week's show, and this may well become a weekly segment. It's Philosophy of the Week. So, weed is legal in Canada, which is lovely. And from time to time, I have been known to partake in some lovely edibles. And often when I partake, I find myself very much looking to the inside of myself, thinking about my life, pondering my anxiety, really. The cool thing about weed is it lets me examine the anxieties without getting super anxious, and I find I often have little epiphanies. And this week's philosophy moment is one of those epiphanies. I'll clean it up a bit, because it contains profanity. But basically, one of my biggest issues with anxiety is constantly going over the things I did in the past and just hating on myself. Why did I say that? Why did I do that? Why couldn't I just been a normal freaking person? And that gets you down after a while. Not to force you to be my therapist, but I do often find myself thinking, oh, I hate myself because of this ruminating about the past. But then I was high one day and I just had the idea pop into my head that just changed my relationship with the past. Now, I'm not saying this will help everybody. And I'm not saying this will, be an epiphany that changes your life like it was for me. But just the one phrase, and again, I'm cleaning it up. I used stronger language, but the phrase was, screw it, it's in the past. And I know this sounds totally obvious. Everyone who struggled with anxiety has thought to themselves or had people say to them, it doesn't matter, it's in the past, get over it. And that doesn't really help. But for some reason, when I just thought to myself, screw it, it's in the past, I actually had to edit that because I said it the proper way the first time. But when I say screw it, gosh darn it, it's in the past, it really helps. Because it just focuses my brain on the idea that I can't change it. I was a different person, The longer ago a story was, the less it was me. And all I can do now is do better than I did in the past. So why ruin the present just because the stuff is in the past? Now, again, none of this stuff I'm saying right now is remotely unique. Really, all this particular quote-unquote lesson is just try using that phrase when you find yourself ruminating on the past like that, if you are the kind of person that does that, and just see how it makes you feel. And if it doesn't do it, play around. Try to find your own phrase. Because there must be something that can help just give you that epiphany. Because ever since I've had that epiphany, whenever I start ruminating about the past, I can shut it right down. Just with that phrase. It's not magic. It's not, related to any therapy I've had. I unfortunately haven't had therapy. It's just a weed-inspired epiphany that has served me really well. So if that could potentially do you any good, please try it out, because it's done me some good. Anyway, that's stuff I Googled this week. We learned about the 5 pillars of Islam. We learned about honey crystallization, hernias, and rejection-sensitive dysphoria. Not so much the fun stuff this week. Oh, here's another thing I Googled this week. Alicia Cuthbert, girl next door. Not useful for you, but she looks good. Also, show recommendation. Oh my God, show recommendation. Jean-Claude Van Johnson. You need to watch Jean-Claude Van Johnson. It's the best. It might be one of my, well, it is one of my favorite shows ever. It might be in my top 5. It is phenomenal. Like, Jean-Claude Van Damme is actually pretty good in it in terms of acting. The action's great. And the story and everything is just so ludicrous and wonderful. And it's the perfect show for nowadays. And I don't understand why it's not more popular. It feels like it has its finger right on the pulse of modern society. And I don't understand why it's not more popular. I might actually make a whole video just on this because it's bafflingly unpopular. So yeah, it's on Amazon Prime. If you have Prime, please do yourself a favor. Watch Jean-Claude Van Johnson. If you need to know a synopsis, look it up. It's basically Jean-Claude Van Damme parodying Jean-Claude Van Damme movies in the best way possible. I can't say enough good things about it. Watch it. That's it for this week. Hope you enjoyed the learning. I sure enjoyed the learning. I hope some of you maybe are helped by the screw it, it's in the past phrase. And I hope all of you watch Jean-Claude Van Johnson because it's amazing. Okay? Watch it. Watch it. Okay. Now, this is just going to be ASMR. Just kidding. All right. Anyway, hope you have a good week. I'll see you guys next week. And take her easy. Later, Gators.